I haven't done a video in a long time, and I think it's a good time today. I've been looking at the systems. So the basic idea is that we don't rise to our hopes and dreams and expectations in life. We fall to the level of our systems. And I was thinking about that from the perspective. I analyzed the difference between the Roman Catholic Church, which is quite a phenomenal institution in terms of how long it's endured, versus the thinking that was underlying in the minds of the reformers in the Reformation. Not to have a debate about Catholicism versus the Protestant Church, not at all, but the thinking that's underpinning them, and the reality that our thinking determines our success and how we analyze things. The reformers' position, of course, led to fragmentation and a million different Reformed Protestant churches, where the Catholic Church is remarkably stable, actually unbelievably so, until today. And if you think about what I'm on my way to the factory now, and at the factory we're gonna there's certain outcomes that we need in terms of the organization of labor and people. And whether we're successful with that or not is predicated upon the philosophical underpinnings of the system that we're going to approach. What is the system in my mind in terms of teaching people and organizing labor, and then the minutiae of the meat factory? So I was talking to the head of innovation company in Europe this week, and in that discussion we spoke about the fact that innovation and NPD is best done outside a factory setup, because in a factory the NPD department becomes like a QC department, and problems directly associated with production always has precedence over pure NPD work. And the importance of NPD work became clear to me again when I was thinking about this difference between the Catholic Church underpinnings in terms of thought and that underpinning the Reformation. And it boils down to the difference between the views of Aristotle and Plato in terms of logic. But we're not going to get into that. If you want to get into that, send me a message and I'll refer you to the article that I've done on the subject this week. But the fact of the matter is that when you I'm working with somebody, a close collaborator, a colleague, a business partner in South Africa, he's in a factory. He's got a factory. The experience is factory. And when he approaches NPD, it's from the factory perspective. And and of course it will always be from a factory perspective. It's almost like asking somebody to think outside the system, which becomes very difficult. And everything in his environment is set up. And what I'm advocating for is for when you think about NPD, that if you want to perform NPD in a environment that is more conducive for it, similar to thinking about philosophical questions within the framework of Catholicism versus the Protestant tradition. That's one of the first decisions that you need to make before you even approach the subject, or any other tradition, more a Buddhist perspective or whatever the case may be. But those are those are things that determines to a large extent how we think about it and what our outcomes will be when we think about it. So when we think about NPD, and one of the things in meat science, for example, that immediately comes to mind is the reality of the three-body problem. The fact that we can mathematically predict the movement of two bodies in terms of their movement and their distance from each other at any point in time. And the moment when we introduce a third body to that, it becomes impossible. Then we can only solve that problem through observation and by testing for where what body will be at what point in time, given what velocity and mass and all those type of things. And that problem of complexity is heightened within the meat science environment, because we work on anything is conditionally true. At the moment, those conditions are predominantly the pH and the temperature and the time, and mechanical interference in for example the protein, right? And those are the main areas that we specialize on at the moment. And then I've, over the last couple of weeks, also highlighted the fact that even the phase of the moon, in terms of the gravitational pull of the moon, will have an impact. To some extent, it may be so small that it's undetected and that it is irrelevant for most observations, but in certain environments it may become relevant. And so it's not true that it's completely irrelevant. So where on earth you do the experiment and at what time of the month you do the experiment will have some bearing on the results. Like I said, it may be so small. It may be in certain instances bigger than we think. And that is, I think, again, one of those broader philosophical issues in science to consider, and in meat science, because for many years they did not take pH into account. In the 1920s and 30s, when a lot of the work on the efficacies of certain processes like curing with nitrates were done, we didn't take pH into account for a very long time, and so it skewed all those tests that was done. Had to be redone to an extent, and the data was of far less value to us than all that work that was done, and we didn't take a crucial element into account. Okay, now when we come to meat science, inherently it's a complex environment, and how do we solve the problem? Because when we test for when we add a combination of ingredients, we definitely slap bang in the ambit of the third body problem, and the complexity just goes beyond what is reasonable. And even with AI, it becomes almost impossible to predict, except through experimentation. And then that experimentation is always done at a certain temperature for a certain time with a certain mechanical action and at a certain pH. And the impact of the different functional ingredients that we add to the mix is they influence each other so dramatically that the outcome of even a small change to the mix is unknown. So what one should do is to build up a database of where two variables are always tested in conjunction with each other at different concentration or inclusion levels. And we must start building up, for example, a starch and the gum, the particular starch and the particular gum, and then how that particular starch was processed is even will have a different will have a result on the outcome of the functionality. So have a consistently a starch produced in a consistent manner, a type of starch, and then at different concentrations, and then it will be important to do that in rapid succession. So the tests that we do, the type of trials that we do, can't be long-winded and take 2 or 3 days. It's the type of thing that we must be able to do within minutes or hours. And then from that database, we need to, and by testing these items in against each other, let's say we have a pair every time, we pair against each other and in combination. And then, of course, each of the ingredients in isolation will be evaluated on its own at a certain hydration level. That's the other complicating factor, right? Because hydration level impacts efficacy. And then once we've built up a vast database of that, we can start to understand in combination, and then swap those concentrations. In other words, if we compared substance A to B and C to D, then A to D and B to C, for example, at different concentration levels. And then we can start thinking about combining A, B, and C, and then run the same trials and B, C, and D, and then A, B, and D, and so on and so forth. But it's a very rigorous and systematic approach that is required. Now that I miss in that tool set, I miss in contemporary meat science. And if we do the work in this way, I think we're gonna have remarkable insights that we're gonna gain, and surprising information is gonna come up. And I think at the end of the day, the database that we're going to build up, we're going to change. What we're doing is we change data to information. And as we change the data to information, it makes programming with that information more possible. And this is one of the and now to find this is a difference of approaching it than compared to if we say we just need a little bit more firmer this or that, and we add a little bit more starch, whether it's tapioca starch or whether it's potato starch or whatever the case may be, corn starch, just with a broad knowledge of the general efficacy. Add a little bit of that, it gives us a slightly firmer bite. It's good enough, boom, let's go. That's the way that NPD is handled in the factory setup at the moment, which yields some results, but is it optimal? I don't think so. I think there's room for a deep discussion about this.